we were talking about Lok Sangra, so thanks to Professor Sinha, he said, since you are writing about it, give me a scale. So that forced me to go and develop. That forced me to go back to chapter 3 in Bhagavad Gita and then develop items. So it took 5 steps. So first start from the verse itself and see what the verse is trying to say, and then how are you going to use it. And what was also interesting was in English, sometimes the key concept itself gets lost. So when...
Can I clarify the question?
No,
the question is not on how the scale formation, then people know.
Right.
Basic issue I am talking about is something which is more experiential, observational.
Right.
If I have to put it in a pencil and paper scale, it goes against the grain of that.
Right.
Something. That is what the issue for many of these so-called.
So let me continue. The reason I was elaborating a little bit is because most people, just like you read English texts and never go to original, and you are doing still Indian, psychology and management, the same thing happens. You start from English. So think about self-transcendence. Now you want to develop an Indian scale of self-transcendence. Even if you use gunas, the whole point is, where is it based? So are we going to some original text? So that was one part of it. Now the second part, so that it goes against the ethos. So we are kind of not believing in measurement. I would simply say that if we follow multiple methods, every method has its limitation. So the measurement will have its limitation, but it will be valid in its own box. And however, it depends on the scale developed, and you just have to constantly play with it. And no scale in psychology or management is perfect, even in the West. Right? So what I'm saying is, we should not only use that method, but that method has its own beauty, if you want to say. I would say that has its own beauty. And this is why the most recent Nobel Prize winner, his research is in India and it's in economics, but the point is, even when Amartya Senji measured poverty, it was really unmeasurable. So the economist has this favorite say, even if you can't measure it, measure it. So I guess we can. And it has its limitation. So I don't know if I addressed your question, but...
True, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect would be, when we are considering, when we feel that we have to use a methodological component from the West, that's where, we use a term or a scale. So contextualization is one, operational definition of another one. So that when we operationally define, this is what the guna I mean, and the tool that I am using measures that particular component, you will be satisfying the criterion of that. I know the reservation of that. So what happens is that, we feel that, in this context, I am defining guna in terms of this. So that from the point of view of evaluation, from the point of view of the criterion component is concerned, that is concerned. I agree that this cannot be in terms of 1, 2, 3. Again, when you say guna itself, the manifestation of the guna itself can vary based on that. That's the limitation with which we have to operate. Okay, that's all.
Thank you so much. Dr. Assaw, you mentioned about the subjective and the objective. But it seems that you might be still within a framework of dualism between the subjective and the objective. Therefore, the challenge is, in our research practice, how do we overcome the dualism between the subjective and objective and cultivate a new language, for example, subject to objectivity, and what kind of inspirations we can draw from Indic traditions. My queries to Bhabukji is, thank you so much, and your engagement with indigenous research also points in multiple critical trajectories. For example, when you are doing indigenous research with dialogue with Arabic sources, with Quranic sources, your pointer to China. Therefore, this is a point that needs to be emphasized since we are talking about Bharatiya management. The whole discourse of indigeneity is not just a closed discourse. It is part of a planetary humanity. And it is in this sense the very notion of the life world that you are beginning with. The very life world itself is planetary. So how do we cultivate a planetary life world in our research practice and link life world to what can be called as living words? In terms of language then, of course, each word is untranslatable. But because it is not translatable, is it a fatalism? My question would be that how can we cultivate a sadhana with translation and what kind of modalities? And my final queries would be that in terms of culture, that culture shapes us, but cultural shaping is not cultural determinism. And finally, about your brief pointer to secularism and Hindu, I am a practicing Hindu, at the same time I am secular. Therefore, secularism and Hindu are not opposed to each other. And how do we cultivate a morality of relationship between the spiritual and secular, where I am a Hindu, at the same time I am secular, and at the same time I am spiritual?
So before you answer, I'll just take a couple of minutes because
the way we have chosen the participants to this workshop, everyone is a potential speaker. That's why they're all called experts. And that is on one side. And the other side, we have made it so packed that you're going to have a really long and hard working day. Actually, your working day has not even started. It's going to start only at 5:30. So, I request, to keep your questions brief. Don't do a review of the speaker's talk. And also, it should be something that is going to benefit everybody in the audience. If it is a question that you have, then I would recommend that you please, take it outside, because all the speakers are staying with us, most of them at least, and they are available today and tomorrow, and you can always talk to them. There's no issue, or you can connect with them outside. Okay, that's just something I wanted to share. I hope you will receive it in the right spirit. Thank you.
So the context is that Western psychology and all Western knowledge systems basically have been dominant, and cross-cultural psychology came as a reaction even in the West. And the idea was that context matters and you cannot just search for universals. Indigenous psychology movement is newer, and we have a group that you can join. But the basic spirit there is that we need to study each culture in its own context and space rather than look for universals. So the objective, when I study Laja, I do comparison in the end. I talk about global psychology or implications, but that's only to stimulate thinking in the group that is doing indigenous research in other cultures. But I'm really done just talking about Laja in the Indian context. I don't have a need to universalize it. So this is the context in which I'm working and operating. The reason I brought up I'm a practicing Hindu is I don't live in India, I live in America, and every Indian I have met starts by saying I'm secular, and I'm just sick and tired. I'll be honest. I'm just sick and tired. I am a practicing Hindu. I have a sadhana, morning, evening, and this is not something that I'm ashamed of and I'm going to hide. So then let's come to secularism. We are talking about biases. We are talking about prejudices. That's my another research interest, and I'm happy to have dialogue in that space there. So I don't think secularism needs to be said in the next breath that I say I'm a Hindu, but remember, I'm a secular person. Either I'm Hindu, does it already, or I don't have a need to say that. So let's talk about biases and prejudices, and I'm happy to have a dialogue, starting with all both to the current time. So that's where I was saying why I say I'm a practicing Hindu. And I did fasted for Ramadan last year. So it's up to you. You can think whatever you want to think about. But that's me. I think the Ramakrishna mission has done disservice to Ramakrishna, who practiced all paths. He did not promote Vedanta. He lived every path. He was willing to eat beef when he was practicing.
Can you quote the source?
Huh?
You said he was willing to eat beef. Can you quote the source?
Yes.
Please.
Let me tell. Yes. Yeah, it is in the same. No.
No, let's not take things out of context and make generalized statement.
Let me finish this first, please. But his manager, he said, all I can give, that is scandalous. Of course, you have to look at the year when you look. All I can give you a Muslim cook. So he had a Muslim cook for the 3 days he was a Muslim. For a Brahmin, that is already way out on the limb in 1890, 1885. So the point is, don't run with these things. It is in Sri M's, report. It's also in other reports and that's what my source is. So I'm not going on hearsay. So that is hearsay already, actually. Sri M is reporting it, but the point is he was a devotee and he was reporting as what he saw and heard. So going back to this issue of secularism, I think we have attached a lot of meaning to it, and in the West it's almost like you become defensive if you are talking about you are a Hindu or you are practicing Hindu and things like that. And so that was the context in which I was sharing. So we talk about indigenous. So unless we develop each indigenous psychology and knowledge systems, we can't have comparison. That's my position, and that's why I'm working on developing constructs and models for our research. I don't know if I missed something. Pardon me. But something for you.
The issue that you raised was on subjective and objective component is concerned. So the response is that how do you define what is subjective and objective component? So I was looking at from the research perspective is concerned. So not from an individualistic perspective. So learning, teaching from an individual perspective. And when you talk in terms of a research perspective, whether it is an objective component is concerned. So from that angle I was talking about, I'm not entering into the dialogue between subjectivity and objectivity compared to the dualism component an individual gets into. So not a philosophical question of the Dvaita component, I was not talking about. Purely from the educational perspective, from a learner's perspective, from a researcher's perspective.
Research only empirical. Only other methods like analytical or descriptive.
No, that's what I said. See, when you say what is the purpose of research,
someone was saying that empirical study only is accepted for publications. Is it true?
No, that's what I was saying. So, researcher, there is a need for an alternative methodology. That's what we were talking about. So, that's where I think in the morning also, I think inaugural address was also talking about mentioning about I also happen to be a MBA and I'm interested in Indian psychology. So gradually, if that mindset is changed, probably the new methodology also evolves and gets accepted.
Qualitative research methodology is quite established now. So the handbook is in its 5th edition, I think, or 4th edition. So I don't think we need to apologize for doing qualitative research. I have written 3 papers using autoethnography. So Dr. Jha's point was that is still not in the same league as the quantitative studies are, and let's not run away from it. So one solution that I have seen that works in the American model is for tenure you pay the price, and after tenure you say the hell with it. And so this is one way of doing it. Another way is to have multiple research streams so that you can have the quantitative stuff, but then you do other things.
Some studies cannot be quantified, right?
Yeah, no, so what I'm saying is, if you have multiple topics, then you can multiple streams, then you can use one stream is empirical, so that satisfies people, and you are doing more. So you'll end up doing more rather than less.
So I think, one thing is, when I heard both of you and the many people who are commenting or asking for clarifications, I think one reality we are missing. That reality is what where we are today. So, for example, the large number of management institutions and the lakhs of students there and the hundreds and thousands of research that is happening. What kind of teaching is happening? What kind of learning is happening? And what kind of research in what way it is happening? From there, we need to work towards Bharatiya. I think, we are here today, Professor Gaur Kairaju. This is what we are doing today. How do we transcend? I think that is where I am slightly getting little lost. Because you are telling me from above, Bharatiya is like this, Bharatiya is like that. Fine, I have no issues. But this is where we are today. How do I take towards that? Is what somehow I am slightly getting lost.
I was going to add your point. Madhavan, I was going to add your point in response.
No, I just want to say, if you take the Nyaya Sutras, take the Grantha called Nyaya, the first sutra says there are 17 ways to acquire knowledge. I think if you teach research methodology in India from now on, Nyaya Sutra, Nyaya Grantha is compulsory. All your questions are answered there. Some pramana, different types of. The entire text is only that. In fact, the current research methodology will pale in comparison if we have understood Nyaya. Tarkikas use it for a particular way, but a researcher can use, because how to establish knowledge is the fundamental question in research. And we have a great darshana called Nyaya. Nyaya and Vaisheshika will be very useful to promote Bharatiya research. One of the points. Maybe other things, we will be inspired to find new research methodologies which are acceptable, much better actually.
The order of that sutra, Pramana, Prameya, Sanshaya, Prayojan.
Yes.
Beautifully how we are moved from us.
Vitanda, Jalpa, so many are there. There are 17 of beautifully.
And what objections can be there?
How to establish a piece of knowledge. So that's one way.
No English translation of this.
Now I request to all delegates, but last questions in one question we will take 10 questions.
Yes, I like this. What referring to Professor Mahadevan, I developed ontology and epistemology of research based on Hindu philosophy, the causation theories, and integrated it with my area spirituality and management. My question which I wanted to raise before the esteemed speakers was two questions. One, what methodological innovations you think will do justice with Bharatiya management? Number one. Number two, when we teach courses related to Bharatiya management, what pedagogy will make a difference in that? That was the two questions.
So on methodology, and so this will probably address your question, I try to remember to address. So a short answer to your question is what Dr. Mahadevan already said, that we are taking small steps now, things will happen over decades, maybe hundreds of years. And so, this group will be gone, forgotten, but hopefully what we are doing will continue. And therefore, it's coming from here, but what is happening here? So these little things we are doing, hopefully, will take roots, one person at a time, two people at a time. So that's one way of looking at it. So we don't need to get despondent. That's how I look at it. And see, I teach at American University, and I'm not upset about things. So I do my stuff and let the chips fall where they would, and that is that. They have given me tenure, so they're not going to bother me. So I keep doing what I enjoy doing. And that's part of my sadhana, so that works for me. So I think that, so for methodology, for research method, I completely agree with Mahadevanji. If we have to teach research method, Nyaya has to be a required text. This is because everything I learned in Western methodology, I feel stupid when I studied Nyaya Sutra. It's like, I thought I became smart by learning this, but it is an old technology and it has been there, but I was never taught. And probably even engineering students can learn that and they will still gain. One of the things, for example, I notice is, and the two scholars can help me here, but people give examples. So one negative does not, I can't give, you told something, I can't point your mistake, that is not an answer. And this is a definite statement in Nyaya Sutra that this is not how you argue, this is not how you debate. And I hear people do all the time. So it's almost like Nyaya provides us the Indian version of rule of Roberts, or Roberts' rule. How should you engage in a dialogue? So on methodology, so for students, graduate students, I would recommend Nyaya Sutra and, because that will prepare them. And therefore the research itself will become enriched. But, we will have to have a balance between qualitative and quantitative. And so most of my research in Indian psychology is qualitative. And there is an audience there that supports it, that encourages it. So it's not that, we are a complete neglected minority. We are a minority for sure, neglected also probably, but still there is some acceptance. So qualitative research methods would help us. And of course there are, text analysis, for example. But even text analysis has so many shades. So when we study Bhagavad Gita, people have also called them as master narratives, master cultural narratives. When we study Kabir, that's going to provide a different flavor. And it's not like Bhagavad Gita, but nevertheless it has so many wise ideas. So I just finished writing a paper on Prem in Kabir, and I identified 8 themes. And everybody thinks Prem is easy, but Kabir says Kachin Prem ki gali. So whoever thinks Prem is just a wonderful easy thing, it's all wow, that's not what Kabir says. So I think qualitative methods would be useful. On teaching, my favorite is storytelling. And I would go back to Western literature and cite Roger Schenck. And he's a computer guy and he's done research. So this is the same guy, Adelson and Schenck, with script. And then now he has done on storytelling. And he says intelligence is storytelling. Intelligence is remembering proper story and telling it in proper time. So I think since we already have a culture of storytelling, for education, I think storytelling would be an interesting approach to include. And maybe we are all storytellers already and we don't think about it. But if we start thinking about it, then we could identify stories, we could help students use stories, proverbs, integrating proverbs in our dialogues for problem solving, etc. And if we want scientific words, then these are memory organizing packets, MOPs, in cognitive science it's used. So that's what proverbs are. So I think we can use stories for teaching and qualitative research method, but I am not giving up on quantitative method. I am not giving up on control group design, because I think we can do that also. And they are good in their own box. That's all I would say.
Professor, this question is for you. I am Dr. Somnath here. You have been consistently telling that you are a practicing Hindu. Practicing Hindu. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, when he was young, in the gullies of Baroda, he was beaten by caste Hindus. He rose and he said, I am a Hindu. I used the word I am a Hindu when I faced challenges in Africa when I was traveling. I am a Hindu is a more powerful word than telling I am a practicing Hindu. Baba Sahib, later on he defines what is practicing Hindu. Practicing Hindu, he says, you are always governed by multitudes of commands and prohibitions. Huge difference is there. If we say practicing Hindu and I am Hindu, with that we have to define what is Bharatiya management. Is Bharatiya management for practicing Hindus or for Hindus? For both. We have to define both. Mohan Bhagavad says it is for Hindus. He has defined. We don't say the word practicing Hindus because there's a lot of connotation when I say I am a practicing Hindu and a Hindu.
30 seconds.
Okay, we'll take it offline afterwards, so we'll talk in the break.
Sir, you are telling about Lajja, Is it, since you are studying on Lajja, I want to add small knowledge. The Lajja Gauri Puja is happening in Karnataka, northern part. In almost all Hindu temples, there is a Lajja Gauri sculpture is there. For your studies, you can add this one.
Thank you.